There's this guy driving, and he's coming close to a stoplight, and it turns yellow, so he slows down and he stops. Person behind him starts honking like crazy and yelling and giving him the finger and just going nuts. And cop behind her goes up to her car, knocks on the door, and asks her to roll down the window and says, get out of your car, and takes her down to the police station and arrests her, throws her in jail. After a couple hours, he goes back and he gets her, he brings her out and goes, I'm really, really sorry. I'm sorry I arrested you, but I was looking at the back of your car and it had this sign about pro-life and Jesus lives and, be kind. And so I just assumed the car was stolen. I got a quote for you by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I'm going to be holding my notes most of today because I want to get these stories you're about to hear right. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. Now, are we just talking about inner beauty here? Let's see. Bring up the first slide, please. If I have the belief that I can do it, I shall surely acquire the capacity to do it, even if I may not have it at the beginning. Look at that face. That is a beautiful face. It feels like it's slipping off me. Fix that there. That face, let me tell you a lot of folks know what he did in India, but long before India, he was in South Africa and was the first to burn the registration certificates together with 3,000 others. He was imprisoned 4 times for hard labor and really didn't accomplish a tremendous amount in South Africa for those he left behind when he left, but somehow did not feel discouraged by that. In fact, felt strengthened with the idea that he could go on and do even better things. Got clear on what it was to have a nonviolent protest, went on to, as we all know, kick the British, the most powerful empire in the world at that time, out of India. He didn't do that by getting all, this is hard. I don't know what I'm going to do. He did it. And so when he gives us that kind of message, that if it is ours to do, we will surely acquire the capacity to do it. It's coming from somebody who really knows what he's talking about. Next slide, please. Another beautiful face. Look at that face. Look at how it shines. God doesn't call you to be successful. He calls you to be faithful. Isn't that what we teach here? That success comes out of the belief, out of the knowing, out of the faith. The success doesn't come first. The faith does. Here's somebody who went to India and in the midst of pestilence and disease, saved thousands of children and wound up living to 87 at a time where the average lifespan was 79. Look at that face. That's beautiful. Next slide, please. This is Palden Gyatso. Not everybody knows this man, but I'm going to tell you about him. The human body can bear immeasurable pain and yet recover. Wounds can heal, But once your spirit is broken, everything falls apart. This guy was captured by the Chinese and tortured almost every single day for 33 years. And the only thing that concerned him was that he would stop loving the Chinese who were torturing him. Look at that face. This is a man who was tortured 33 years, and look at that face. That's a man who knows God. Can you see it? Can you see it? Next slide, please. Do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Now, here's a man who knows about that. Kicked out of his own country, exiled. He tells this great story about every Tibetan who leaves the country gets to meet with him and gets to tell him their story. And that he says they always cry together. He feels the pain and tears of every single one of them. And then they reach a place of joy for what they have together now, after they have gone through the pain and the sorrow. Look at that face. Is that beautiful or what? Next slide, please. This is Alice Walker. She's best known for writing the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Color Purple. Here's some things you may not know about her. Her and her ex-husband were the first legally married interracial couple in Mississippi. You think that was easy? She created and taught the first class in the country dedicated to African-American women writers. And she was the first African-American to win the Pulitzer Prize. Now, I don't know about you, but it occurs to me that anybody who has done something first has been through quite a lot. And look at that face. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. This is somebody who knows. She was in the civil rights movement in the 60s. She was pelted, thrown in jail, and refused to give up her power. Next slide, please. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. The first black appointed Anglican dean of St. Mary's Cathedral in Johannesburg. Now, this is a man who went through apartheid, Desmond Tutu. This is a man who's thrown in jail, beaten. 1976 became a consecrated bishop, the first black secretary general of the Interdenominational South African Council of Churches. In 1984, they gave him the Nobel Prize for his efforts to end apartheid. And then in 1986, he's elected Archbishop. In 1995, Nelson Mandela had him chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission because Nelson Mandela wanted a country that worked together. And so did Desmond Tutu. Does that look like somebody who's been beaten, downtrodden, put down? They tried. But he rose. And it shows all over his face. Doesn't it? Am I just making this up, or can you see it too? All right. Next slide, please. The purpose of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear for newer and richer experience. Let me tell you a little bit about Eleanor Roosevelt you may or may not know. Back when she was the first lady, almost all journalists were guys. So she decided to have women-only journalist conferences in her office. And it forced all the newspapers to hire women because it was the only way they got to sit in on her news conferences. You think that went over easy? 1938, we're talking about. This is way before civil rights. Okay. She goes down to a conference of the human welfare in Alabama, okay, in 1938, and sits down next to an African-American associate. And they come running up to her and go, "You can't sit here. We have a separate section for whites." And she refused to move. She just said, "No, this is where I'm sitting." They didn't know what to do, First Lady of the United States. They certainly were too afraid to arrest her, but she didn't know that. She didn't know that when she made that stand. She just knew it was right. I don't know about you, but I'm inspired by these folks. You know, they come up in life, they're not, they weren't born with superpowers, right? She can't stop a speeding bullet, run faster than a locomotive, or leap tall higher, and yet these are the folks that have changed the world simply because they said so. And instead of coming out broken, came out looking beautiful. Next slide, please. Can't, do this without our fearless leader. Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. So Dr. Holmes is reading about all this metaphysical stuff long before he's Dr. Holmes. And he studies with Emma Curtis Hopkins. And he studies all the great masters. And one day, one of his coworkers comes to him and says, "I'm having a really hard time." And he thinks, "Well, why don't I try this thing I've been working on with you, and let's see what happens." And so he tries the first spiritual mind treatment. And the person that was sitting with him gets results and goes, "Wow, what you did was really powerful." And then he brings along a friend of his, comes in and says, "Well, you did that for him, now will you do that for me?" And then somebody else comes in, and that kept going until finally folks said, "Listen, we want you to talk to us about what it is you're doing here." So he didn't have an idea that he was going to learn all this stuff and then just go out and talk to thousands. He thought, "I'm going to put this to use. I'm going to do this thing." And then people wanted to know how he did it. And more people wanted to know, until finally he and his brother figured, we better somehow organize this thing. And then some folks said, "Well, if you organize as a church, then it's a nonprofit, and then there's benefits to that, and this, that, and the other thing." And before you know it, we got ourselves the first Church of Religious Science, of which, by the way, this place is the 10th of the entire movement back in 1949. You are in history sitting here. This place was the 10th of all the churches. There's now like 400 and something of them now. And those are the only ones registered. There are lots that are no longer registered. This was the 10th. Bring up my last slide, please. Can you feel the power of it? So the thing that I noticed that all these people have in common was they decided that they would source their lives. They chose that no one, they were going to be a victim to nothing and no one, that they would source it, that they could make a change out of themselves, that no one else was going to be responsible for the change they were making in themselves and in the world. That's what they all have in common. And I grabbed these folks because of because this is what they looked like late in life. This is what they looked like near the end. This is what they looked like look like when they've gone through all the suffering, where they went through all the hurt. And this is how they came out the other side. And it occurred to me that that's true for any one of us. I have a poem here by one of my favorite poets, Kahlil Gibran. It's called On Pain. Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hand of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the clay which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. Your pain is your potion to understanding, to compassion, to love. All these folks chose love. Chose love. No matter what they went through, no matter how many times they were beaten, thrown in jail, exiled, whatever happened, they chose love. And because of it, they shine. This is what's possible for us. For each and every one of us can shine like that if we embrace our pain the way they have, rise up in choice, see ourselves as source, and stand in love. I love you. Thank you. Okay, take out what you're going to give. Hold it in your hand. hold it in your hand. Because this is not just, if you've crumpled up your dollars, open it up. If you crumpled up your check, open it up. Hold it. This is energy. This is your gift to life. This is God. This is the God energy that you give and then receive multiplied abundantly. Remember that the more you give, the more you receive. That this is the point at which you get to give and receive and get into the flow of abundance. Get into the flow of prosperity. There is no end to the infinite of God, and that's what you're holding in your hand. So as you hold this, repeat after me. God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of